So hello everyone. Actually, it was my first time that I saw the picture of me. I look like a bot. It was super funny. Um, Actually, it's my first time in Berlin, so I'm super excited, and it's super cold here. It's always cold, that cold in Berlin. Where's the sun? Anyway, I know all of you are tired, myself as well. So I'm gonna start with a story. I'm giving you a story about two frogs sitting in the boiling water. How many folks in the crowd familiar with this fairy tale? Cool. Your parents send you to a bad kindergarten. Um, okay, so the story tells that if you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, you will immediately, of course, try to get out. But, and it's a big but, um, if you place them gently in a solid water and turn on the heat on low, they will float there, and as the water gradually heats up, the frog will sink into a quiet atmosphere with a smile on his face, like all of you after lunch that you eat your salmon, and he allow himself to be boiled to death. Don't ask me how I know. I know he will die. I think this is the time to make a disclaimer that no animal were hurt for the sake of this talk. It's just a metaphor. Anyway, believe it or not, humans are very familiar with frogs. In the power of adjustment with new situation is the same. For example, one of the problems with most of the successful mobile application in the world with Phase 2, in few years after you submit the application to the App Store, it's called scale. Sometimes, without notice, we realize that we are in the pot with super hot water, and sometimes it's too late. But if not, we need to think different. We need to change the day-to-day work, how we work every day. Because at the beginning it was pretty easy and super fast. Small company, great team, and we had small amount of developers. We work on the same repository, in the same room probably. We are able to manage ourselves that if I develop one feature, I'm not breaking your feature, and everything goes smooth. But from day to day, we realize that we are growing and things got much more complicated. You change the structure of the company and you can't work the same way. As the company grows, the app grows, you have more feature, more developer join into the team, and it's indeed become much more difficult with React Native. It's difficult to make the same with a simple React Native architecture. I have to admit that with React Native, it's much more complicated, just because we need to deal with 3 different environments. I have Visual Code, I have Android Studio, Xcode. We have to deal with 3 different package manager. We have NPM, as well with Gradle, Maven. Now we even have to use CocoaPod, which is nightmare. You start to feel that all of it actually affect your performance. Builds are super flaky and failing more often. You have conflicts from hell. Everything breaks, everyone breaks each other, and there is a huge mess. It's totally chaos. But if you feel that too, so congratulations, it's a sign that you hit scale. So hello again, I'm Omri, I'm from Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm currently leading the mobile platform at Wix. You can find me at Twitter at .Omri Bruchim. I'm not one of the coolest guy in the neighborhood with a nickname like Joker or something, just my name. And this is my new baby born. This is the time to thank Dana, my wife, that gave me the opportunity to come to Berlin alone, to sleep at night 4 days. Anyway, I originally came from iOS background, but now I'm totally in React Native. I'm focused mostly on performance and architecture of the application. And today we are going to have a case study about Wix application. I will give you a brief overview about Wix Mobile story. We will define together what the problem we had, how we solved them with some secret sauce, and at the end we discuss whether it worked for us or not. Well, of course it is, but stay tuned. So if you are unfamiliar with Wix, Wix is a company to give you the option to create a stunning website and actually to manage your business on the go. For example, if you have a restaurant, you can create a website in few seconds and in a minute get a reservation for tables from your phone by customers. If you have a yoga class, you can create a website and define your services as the customer can book services on the go from your phone. We currently serve 150 million users around the world. Well, we started our mobile journey with React Native back in 2015. To be honest, we took a chance with React Native. It's something like start developing with Flutter 1 year ago, and we don't like Flutter. It was super promising, so we decided to go for it. Today we are a huge application, more 600 different screens. We release 2 versions every week. Actually, it's 4 because it's 2 for iOS, 2 for Android. We have around 90 mobile developers and growing fast. Most of the developers come from web background. It's important to mention. On 20 different teams. I want to start with a brief overview of our problem because we need to understand what we're gonna solve. So let's talk about scale. I try to define it in 1-2 sentences. So scale is the ability to grow without compromising on development velocity and increase the velocity without compromising on product quality. Do you understand what is the problem? So the problem is that we want to eat all the cake. We want to get all the benefits without affecting the app. We actually want grow, velocity, quality. It's too much. In other words, we want to be able to increase the teams, release more features to the customers without affecting time to production. And if you want all of it to be fast, it's actually double trouble because to grow, you need time. If you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, so let's drill in and see some examples. So let's take a look if it's possible with if it's possible to grow with a simple React Native application. So at the bottom we have iOS and Android-based SDK, which has nothing to do with React Native. We have the SDK of the iOS and Android. At the top level we have our application business logic. Actually, this is written with JavaScript and React. This is where all the application logic is written. All the screens, all the UI, all the business logic. Most of the application is there. In the middle we have React Native Framework. That's the way that you talk with the native side. And if you think that you want to implement your own native implementation, like I want to read QR code by the camera, so you probably need to create your own library, React Native library. You need to implement the JavaScript side, the Objective-C, and the Java. And at the end, we left only with the JavaScript libraries, which you are fans, because if I'm a 10 years old kid, I can add my malicious code into your application and you don't know it. For us, it was a chaos. Why? Most of the people can say that you can move the JavaScript code outside to a different library and connect it as a dependency to the main repository, but it's a problem. Why it's a problem? Just because when you put all the JavaScript side aside, you have a different environment between production and debug, because you have the example project, and the example project don't have the same dependencies as your main application. So it's work you in debug environment, but in production it's broken. Again, for us it was a chaos. Let's count our issues. We have an ownership issue because we are working on the same repo, all the JavaScript side in the same project. No one knows who is the code, just looking at the commit or the blame. We have slow development. Well, it's obvious. Small change in the JavaScript code. I need to compile all the build again and again. Test the code was a nightmare. It's super hard to test the code. It worked locally before I ship it to production. Suddenly it don't work. Integration. It's super tough because I work locally, I push it to master, and then suddenly break other one. Finding and fixing bug is frustrating. Local and production environment I already mentioned. When I'm doing my own library, I can test it on the real environment. And React Native upgrades were kidding me because it's insane. We are 100 developers. It's insane to make an upgrade for the same repository. Well, basically looking all of this issue, we got a Christmas tree. But really, we had to change the architecture of the application. Now we got much more sense of what is the problem, or let's try to solve them. When you design an architecture for your application or for any software in the world, it should fit your organization structure. You can do it the same from other company. So I can give you the use case of Wix. In Wix, we are divided into multiple entities. We call them companies or verticals. These product-oriented entities are actually a set of features that developed by one team, one group. You can think about this company or vertical like a small startup inside a big company of 3,000 people. In addition, we have a professional entities called guild. Guild is the unit all the employees with the expertise. For example, we have server guild, fat guild, and mobile guild. And the guild is responsible for the aligning of all developers to do the same all over the groups. So we have the server guild, as I said, fed, mobile. The mobile is the coolest guys, by the way. The idea is behind the structure. I have one of them here. The idea behind this structure is to give you the ability to run fast and with less interaction between the teams, but with the same infrastructure. So in terms of goal, we want independent development. I want each team to do whatever he wants. You can think about it like an expo. I could take the infrastructure and put my feature on the SDK. We have more web developer that's mobile developer. I mentioned it before. It's important to understand that if I'm a web developer, I can't open Android Studio. It's impossible. They are afraid to use Xcode or Android Studio. It's not like us, I'm mobile developers. We want independent deployment. If I'm creating a new feature, I want to ship it as production as soon as possible. I don't want to wait for the native to compile and everything. We want to run fast. Well, it's obvious. We want the same dev production environment. Again, I want to test my feature on the same SDK to go to production. So we actually want to create something like operation system, an app. You can think about iOS, an application, or extension to Chrome. We want to do the same infrastructure and plugins. We call them otherwise. So back to our simple application. When we look about on this structure, it's not really possible. We can't achieve all our dreams with this simple project. You can think about develop all the iOS application on the same repository. It's insane. So the key for success is most of the time separation of concern. We need to separate things. In backend, they have something that's called microservices. In Fed, they have something that's called micro frontend. So we took both of them and mix and match and created something that we own. So let's start and change the entity. Let's make a new order. First, I want to split the higher level, the React side. Actually, most of the code, as we said, is written in JavaScript. So it's not making any sense to put all the code in the same project. So I split it for two, the infra and the product. Probably they developed by different teams. Okay. Now let's concentrate about the product side. As I told you before, in Wix, most of the company we split it into product groups. So I want to continue with the separation, and because each group want to work independently. So let's split them. We split them into something that's called module. Okay, you can think about again modules like a Chrome extension. We currently have more than 35 modules in the application. Each one of them is an independent team. So again, module is mini Wix application inside the big app. Module is independent, encapsulated business logic into like a block box. They can ship it whatever they want with the development they decided. Module written only in JavaScript. I will elaborate it more later, but important to mention because native code can be inside the module. Modules can communicate with each other. Of course, we want isolation, but there's a lot of cases where one module need to talk with another. Let's say we have module it's called cashier that's take the money, and we have restaurants. So I need to pay for someone. So they need to expose API to each other. Module need to implement an interface. We'll see an example in few seconds. But this is the model. This gives you the opportunity to come into the application and create your own logic and ship it to production. So, okay, we are done with the product teams. That is most of the application. Let's focus on the left part. We took all of these parts and we have the infra JavaScript code. We have the React Native, because we are not developing React Native, but it's important to say that who has the dependency of React Native itself. So we took all of these and put them into a new project. We call it the engine. Let's take a look what is the engine. So the engine is the main entry point of the application. When the app opens, the first line of code is obvious the native side, the app delegate in iOS or the application start in Android. So this code is inside the engine, and actually the first JavaScript code is also the engine. This is the main entry point. It provides an infrastructure to the module. They can focus on writing the product without necessarily understand what's happening when you open the application, and it provides an infrastructure to the model. As I said, it includes all the native dependencies. So this project includes all the native dependencies. If you are using a native dependency outside in the world, you should PR into the engine, and we ship a new version for you, like a new iOS. The difference between iOS 10 and 10.1 is like a new engine released every 2 weeks. This is actually the most important point in all of my talk. The engine includes both iOS and Android binaries. What does it mean? It means that we ship a new project, a new NPM package, you can say, with the binaries of the iOS and Android. It's like, you can see it as an expo. You using the APK or the app files and just inject your code inside. We'll take an example in a few seconds. The engine loads all the modules by config files. I push a config file with all the list of modules into the engine. He load all the modules lazily. It includes all the infrastructure you can think about: push notification, error handling, network accessibility, localization, whatever you can think about. And we expose in the engine to the module how to use this stuff. And the engine is developed by a single infrastructure team. It gives you the products teams to concentrate about the product, not about the infra. So what's left? What about code sharing, the yellow part? So we left with the JavaScript library. JavaScript library it's simple. It can be a common code between modules. It can be a common code between mobile and web. We are a web-oriented company, so there is a lot of cases where the team develop both the web and the mobile. So there are cases we need to take out the code that is shared between both of them and create a JavaScript library. And it's open source if possible, because libraries is, as a rule of thumb in Wix, we are big fans of open source, and every non-related non-Wix code should be open source, meaning everything from the first line of code should be open source. Actually, working in scale with React Native teaches us a lot. We would like to share most of our knowledge and the code with the community. We can take one example. It's called UILib, Wix React Native UILib. UILib is actually a library written mostly in JavaScript. It's mobile design system and UI library. It's a consistent UI and UX all over the app. You can use it by yourself if you want. It's not say that you use the same component as we do. You can have your own theme, and it's improved the velocity by far from before. And we have weekly releases, so if I fix a bug, it's fixed all over the application. So that's all, actually. This is the new architecture. That was the original structure of a small application, and we changed it a little bit. We leveraged the Wix organization structure to achieve something new. We opened the app to many teams. It allowed them to build and maintain their own part of the app. It gives them the freedom in one hand, and again we have a unified product and infra all over the application. So we define the new entities. Let's try to analyze the interaction between them, because it's a new concept. In fact, our main application repository that's been released to Google Play and App Store is just a configuration file. Configuration file with a list of dependencies. It doesn't contain any line of code. One of the dependencies is the engine, and the rest are modules. So this configuration file first load the engine and pass all the other modules to the engine to load them one by one. Now it knows which module to load and the interaction between the modules. The biggest change we did, as I said, is to make a pre-built native images, the APK, and the app outside of the main repository. In your application, most of the application, the main repository is actually hold the project, the iOS and the Android project. So we took it out and put it in the engine. Again, it gives you the flexibility to build something like SDK, and you can test your code with this SDK. It means that each and every team is getting the same environment, same native environment for development, and no need to touch native code. We have the simple script that you can do as a web developer and use the engine and load your module isolated from the others. It saves time, it saves builds, it solves a lot of native integration issues. To understand it better, let's see how modules look like. So this is an example of a simple module repository. It includes the source, of course, all the JavaScript source. It's important to mention only JavaScript, images, test, and two important files. One of them is the package.json, and the other one is the module.js. So let's start with module.js. Module.js is actually my contract with the outside world, the contract with the engine, the contact with other modules. You can see as an example that I have a lifecycle events. What's happened when the app is in the app startup? I have an init function that I can implement and do whatever I want. I have a function that I expose components, methods, services. We take an example in a few seconds, and I have some declaration like again methods and component. I can do something when the app is log in and log out, and if I have something that's related to the infrastructure, I put it into this file. And so this is the module.js. Each module should implement it. It's like an interface. And the package.json, it's all two types of dependencies. Let's start by dev dependency. The dev dependency is actually the engine. I want to bring it as a dev dependency, not a dependency, because the main application have it, the engine as dependency. And dependencies, I can load JavaScript libraries. Well, we talked about JavaScript. So JavaScript library is tricky. They can be a dependencies both of module and the engine. Why? Let's take Lodash or Moment, for example. Lodash and Moment are infrastructure libraries. So probably they should be in the engine. But if I have a shared library, shared JavaScript library, I want to put it in my own module and not necessarily open a pull request to the engine for any JavaScript library that I want. This is one example. Second example, we allow two different Lodash versions in the application. So if I module A, I want to bring Lodash 2, and some other one want to bring Lodash 5. It's possible. We allow this thing. So again, this is module A, which is developed by independent team somewhere in different countries. We are spread over a few countries, not necessarily in Israel, and it uses the engine as the config files include only myself. You can see as an example, I'm loading only myself and the engine. And if I want to check the integration with another module, so I need to change a little bit the package.json, I need to add module B. Module B should be also dev dependency. I am not dependent between two modules as dependency, just because, again, the main repository holds all the list of the modules. So in that case, instead of just module A, I have an environment with two modules. But remember, I have 35 modules. So now I have a closed environment only with me and the other module that I have integration. So now is the time to ask a question. So you don't have necessarily the same environment like production. So it's true. but I have the same native environment. So this is most of the cases where the bugs came from. So how module development process look like? I'm developing my module, I push it to Git, I build it, building the test, build and running the test, and publish a new version. When I publish a new version, the main repository automatically take all the latest version of a module and ship it to production. Easy as it is. Okay, let's take a look at the engine. So you can see the iOS and Android folders. This is the iOS and Android project. Again, the project as it is in your repository. We have the source code, the source folder. It's all the JavaScript source. And at the bottom we have the app build. The app build is again the app and APK that we actually shipped to the stores. The only change which happened in here, before we ship, we take all the JavaScript code of all other the modules and inject it into the application. We release a new version every 2-3 weeks. It's a different development cycle from the modules. Modules should run much more faster than the engine. Sometimes we don't have any changes in the infra, so we not release any new version. And React Native upgrade most of the time is only relevant for the engine. Of course, we have changes in the JavaScript code, but it's less critical. Most of the issues coming from the main project. So we're doing the upgrade to the engine, ship a new version like Android or iOS ship Android 10 and break all over the world, doing the same. And the main repository, as I told you before, is just one file. It's the package.json. It's called the engine, and all the other modules of GA, general availability. If I want to ship a new version of my module, I tag it as GA, and it's ready for production. Okay, let's talk about communication between them. So communication through the engine is a must. You can communicate between modules by requiring. There is no direct communication. Engine should be always the proxy. It helps us to make a contact validation. It's much more scalable. We know what is the connection between the modules, who talk with who and why, and in each state in the lifetime of the application. We have 4 levels of communication. We don't have enough time, so I can tell you that we have components. I can get a component from other module. Let's say again, take an example of I have a members module, which expose all the members in my application, and probably another module won this list, so you can use the component by ID. I have method, again, I can expose function outside. I have event that it pops up. I register for an event, and some other module can broadcast something, and if you want, you can do it. One good example is notification. We have a notification module that if you recognize a new notification, you broadcast to everyone, hey, I got a notification. And we have a service that is a little bit much more complicated, but it's like an event. But I want to ask someone, all the other modules, do you have something for me? And with something with result. So I get back an array with all the results from all the people, all the modules that register to the service. So that's all. I covered a lot. It's not that complicated, but it can take time until all of it sync and you understand it all. It brings us to the end of the presentation, and for the big question, is it work for us? I mean, is it worth all this complicated logic? So hell yes. In terms of goal, we achieve most of the dreams that we think about. We have an independent development. Each team can be tested as a black box, just me and the native infrastructure. If we change a specific module, we should build and test only my module. We have an independent deployment. I will show it in a minute, but if I change one line of code in JavaScript, I don't need to build all the native project again and again. Again, it will help you to think about all of this like an expo. We created our own expo with our own infrastructure, and you can use it if you want. You can use your own expo as you can see today. We have more web developer than mobile developer, Now it's easy peasy, because as a web developer, I can get the engine, write JavaScript code, and test it without open Xcode and Android Studio at all. It's easy, it works. We run fast, really fast. I can focus only on my product without necessarily no Objective-C and Java. We have identical dev production environment, and we created like something like OS, the Wix Mobile OS. What else? React Native upgrade is much more easier now. As I told you before, I changed the engine to suitable for the new architecture of React Native. If it's JSI, if it's Android X, if it's now I need to put all the CocoaPod and stuff, it's not necessarily relevant to the modules. I don't care about it. Just the info team. We have clear API between the teams. It's important. It's important because for 100 people, it's super important to have strict APIs, because otherwise it's a mess. And we have different release process between module and the engine. I mentioned it before, but let's take a look now. If I have a different release process, it means I can release a new engine to the store every 2 weeks, 3 weeks via App Store or Play Store, and the module, it can ship over the air like a code push. So it's actually like the web. I'm making a few changes in my code, in my JavaScript code, and push it immediately to production. It shouldn't necessarily go through the approval process of Apple and Google. It's amazing. It's a huge progress if you are developing mobile, because we are a mobile developer not used to ship product super fast. Taking account all of the above, it makes sense to have mostly engineer with front-end skills. So we have almost the biggest React Native project in the world. We have around 100 developers, 5 sites, 3 different countries, 20 groups, and we're growing super fast. Most of the code written in JavaScript, 30% native and 70% is JavaScript code. Almost all of the code is shared between iOS and Android, because we do it the same in the infra. We are able to release production actually every day. We do it once in 2 times a week, but we can do it every day, and we have millions of active users. So don't let the water boil out. If you have something different, something similar, your application and the company growing super fast, think about scale from the moment that you feel that the water is warmer. Don't wait everything to break. And that's all. If you have any question, you can grab me in the break and ask me a question. Thank you.